Watchers in the fourth dimension.
But a strange man kept telling me to take my clothes off.
Now, come on, we must go back to the TARDIS. It's a madhouse. It's all full of Arabs. It's the rebels.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Don.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Reilly. And come on, Doctor, we haven't got time for butts.
There are always time for butts. This episode, we drop straight back into the middle of a 12-part epic as we return to the Daleks Master Plan, covering the second 6 episodes. We covered the first 6 last time around, so if you missed that, check out our last episode to hear the discussion, otherwise you might get a little lost today. Likewise, last time round we covered all the behind-the-scenes information that we would normally cover, with the promise that we would do a short summary for each half of the story, and then do all of our metrics at the end of this episode. So that means that this time around we jump straight into our short summary, which is in the hands of Reilly. Reilly, over to you.
Last time, the TARDIS crew had just escaped after doing the old switcheroo on the Daleks with the Terranium. So logically, the story takes us to 1960s England and then a film studio where the crew reenacts the final chase scene from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Meanwhile, the Daleks figure out they got duped, the Meddling Monk decides to show up, and oh, by the way, we're in ancient Egypt now. Why? Who cares? Let's go back to Kimball, where the Daleks who are actually advancing the plot have finally decided to turn on their fellow conspirators. The TARDIS crew arrive on Kimball to stop the Daleks plan, and the Doctor disappears. Why? Stop asking questions. Stephen and Sarah head to the Dalek city and get captured by Chin, whose big mouth gets him killed by the Daleks. The Doctor arrives out of nowhere and turns on the Time Destructor to use as a threat to help them escape. Everybody races to the TARDIS. Stephen gets inside, and the Doctor and Sarah age due to the Time Destructor. Eventually, Sarah gets snapped Thanos style, and the Daleks as well. The Destructor burns out, the Doctor and Stephen survive, and the Doctor sadly speaks for the audience at the end by saying, "What a waste, what a terrible waste."
Basically, filler episode. MacGuffin chase continues. Everybody dies. The end.
Yeah.
And it really is that contrived. We're going to jump straight into our discussion with episode 7, The Feast of Stephen.
I'm just going to say it now. I'm very disappointed that this episode wasn't just Stephen eating a meal for 25 minutes. Because it's not like they put a whole lot of effort into it anyway, and that at least would have been funny.
I mean, we would have lost my favorite line of the entire episode where the Doctor says, "This is a madhouse. It is all full of Arabs." This was bonkers.
I wrote down, what the hell? I think I understand what they were trying to do, but it completely goes off the rails in the film studio, where maybe it's because we can't see what's happening because it's, loose cannon reconstruction, but just listening to it, it's just people screaming. It's just people screaming continually for like 8 minutes, 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, I was having some real difficulties. I was like, why is there so much noise? I understand that film sets can be a little bit loud, but not like that.
Well, every character there was like on a hair trigger to have like an emotional breakdown for some reason. Every single one of them. It made no sense. I mean, was it like a self-referential humor that, oh boy, these film types are so emotional or something? I don't know. I really don't know what the hell is going on here.
It's 2 filler episodes for the price of 1. And frankly, I'm disappointed we never found out what happened to that guy's greenhouse.
Yes.
It was mentioned enough. It seemed to be at least pretty important as a setup for a joke, but then it went nowhere. The second half had multiple name drops and craziness. Casting doesn't work that way. I don't know.
Yeah. What I did love about the second half was and I don't know whether this was in the original episode or just in the recon, I assume it was in the original, was the use of those silent film-style title cards breaking up the action.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. I don't know if that was real or just something they put in.
I assume it was real.
I think it was real because one thing that caught my attention was one of the title cards said the chase was on, and I couldn't help but think of the chase. Do you think Terry Nation was being a little playful there and referring back to his own other work?
Full self-referential?
Yeah.
I mean, possibly.
But wasn't this written by Spooner?
No, this one was Terry.
Okay, that almost makes sense. It kind of feels like a Terry Nation.
As a farcical episode, it would have been so much better if they'd let Dennis Spooner write this one. It would have made a lot more sense.
Well, with Spooner, I mean, we're already familiar with him being a little, snappy with the dialogue. If we're going to have a useless episode that's just there to amuse us, then can we get some jokes?
Yeah,
exactly.
It seemed like an extended riff almost on the Empire State Building scene in the chase.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I can understand why they did it, their logic that no one would be watching on Christmas.
Also, when you think about Christmas scheduling in the UK, and even today it's still true to some extent, mostly variety shows. It's, a lot of fluff. It's not too heavy. That's what they're going for. They don't really want the Daleks trundling around exterminating everyone.
But what's more Christmassy than that?
I was going to say that
Bing Crosby.
Yes.
Honestly, this might have been better if the Daleks had shown up and exterminated everyone.
Did everyone forget the classic TV moment in the 1970s where Bing Crosby had a duet with a Dalek singing Little Drummer Boy? Am I misremembering that?
I think you might be just a bit.
Just a little bit. Now I want to see that.
I do too.
This was around the time that I think Roberta Tovey, Susie Who from the movie, released her "I'm Going to Spend My Christmas with the Dalek" single. So,
What?
Oh yeah, the little actress who played Susan in the movie released a single that was called something like "I Want to Spend My Christmas with the Dalek" or "I'm Going to Spend My Christmas with the Dalek," and it was Christmas 1965. One thing about this, and we talked about how difficult this is because we don't actually have the episode. This is probably the one episode that's the least likely to be recovered out of all of them. As far as we know, it was never actually telerecorded. So this was broadcast once and the print was never transferred. It was never sent abroad either for sale or for a preview. The one copy they had was apparently destroyed. So out of everything, this is the one which we are almost certain not to get back.
In the grand scheme of things, I think that's fine.
Now I've said that, it's going to be returned before we publish this episode.
Obviously, we have so many more episodes to go through, but I guess we should bring up the other interesting thing about this episode is the Doctor breaking the fourth wall at the very end.
Yes.
That was slightly unnerving.
So how can we fan wank that away?
I know, exactly. That's the question.
The Time Lords were watching. They're just keeping an eye on the Doctor,
Yeah.
So fan myth had it for years that was completely ad-libbed by Hartnell, which it wasn't. A lot of BBC shows at the time had that kind of break of the fourth wall at Christmas. So
I mean, it couldn't have been ad-libbed. I mean, what was the point of him having a bottle there and pouring a drink?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a nice touch, but it felt very tacked on.
Let's just say, I guess they felt like the entire episode was ridiculous and silly and pointless. So it's like, well, we might as well do this with, on Christmas Day. Why not?
Yeah. I do think that the episode itself was a questionable decision to do it in the middle of a Dalek epic. Maybe they should have made a 6-part story and had a one-off episode, but I wasn't the producer.
Damn you, John Wiles.
Yeah, damn you, John Wiles. So, Volcano, yes, we're back to actual Doctor Who, an actual plot.
And in order to convolute things, we bring in the Time Meddler.
I'm not going to complain.
It kind of works. It's good to see the character, and he plays off the first Doctor so well. I just feel like there was so much more going. Well, there could have been more that was organically coming from this plot, this story, that I didn't feel the need of him coming in.
I don't know. It provided a nice break between Chen talking with some underling about how brilliant he was.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, they already went so far with this whole thing, again, with so many episodes, that it was a nice break, and it did a better of tying some things together, because we do expect him back, because the Doctor just left him stranded. So I thought that was fun. What weirds me out is how they kind of reanimated some of it, and it was really weird when they were showing the pictures of the monk and stuff, and it just looked really bizarre.
Yeah, so a lot of the recons we've had before season 3, so when we did Marco Polo or the Crusade or even the Reign of Terror, for those of us who did the recon rather than the cartoon, the BBC had used the services of someone who literally pointed a camera at the screen and took photos of the episode. And that was really for the directors to use for their show reels. John Wiles, being the wise and trusted producer of Doctor Who, decided he didn't want to do that. So our friends at Loose Cannon had to build a lot of composite photos from publicity shots and other pieces and get creative to actually be able to give us something vaguely watchable.
Well, I mean, give them credit. I think they did a decent enough job. I mean, it does feel disjointed, but I mean, at least it still functions. You can still get a sense of the story.
Some of the more animated parts with like the Daleks and things, those felt a lot more natural. The monk did not.
Yeah. Speaking of the Daleks and Chen, I do love how we go through another delegate.
Yep.
So previously they'd killed off their previous spokesman, Seaweed Man. Now, Melty Face, aka Trantis. Was there something I'd forgotten from episode 6? Because to me it seemed somewhat random that he was chosen as the test subject for the Time Destructor. Was he just annoying everyone?
Sure. These have all kind of blended together for me into a big list of, this is why you can't trust the Daleks. All of you, especially you, Chen, especially in the last episode, you big magnanimous dumbass. It's just...
Yeah. And then of course we get Bobble Man, as I called him, aka Salation, as the next spokesman. And you're just kind of sitting there thinking, how long till he's killed off then?
Are you talking about like the hot stone massage guy?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I thought he looked like he had a little kind of woolen bobbles all over him. Hot Stone's man works
Are those
too.
two separate people? There's a rocky-looking guy, and there's a guy with like the round things.
Yeah, the round things guy.
No, but Julie's right. It is definitely hot stone massage guy. Absolutely.
I'm just disappointed we don't get more of the evil Christmas tree.
I know. Why doesn't he have any lines? I hope he just makes noises, not words. It's like an evil Groot.
Not like the weird like hisses like at the ends of phrases or...
Oh, yeah. So I think we need to discuss the Doctor's ring and how it seems that either they're building up mystery or they just don't want to explain things.
Well, yes and no, but can we talk about the fact that when we watched the Web Planet, I was like, why is this ring so important? And we all said, well, it's not. And then it comes back and it was important again.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for it to come back, but it's just, once again, he's so secretive about like, no, don't, you don't need to know anything about this.
I forget who it was, but one of our friends, either Philip Cully or John Thomas Casey, did tell us at the time we did the Web Planet that the ring played a part in this story, and we'd forgotten that. So kudos to you guys. We're there. Thank you for pointing it out. And yes, it has magical properties, and it's another reference for Reilly to the Web Planet.
Yes.
To be fair, he said that the sun had special properties and he just used the ring to reflect the sun. So there's that.
Good point. This particular episode has my favorite bit of writing. The Time Meddler last line is, "You haven't heard the last of me." And the very next line is Stephen saying, "If you ask me, we haven't heard the last of that monk."
As soon as you said your favorite bit of dialogue, I thought you were going to talk about the cricket match.
Oh, the cricket match. Oh.
And as a reminder, at this point, Douglas Adams was about 13 years old and was a fan.
That whole bit reminded me of the Mitchell and Webb sketches with the snooker commentators.
Yes!
Where nothing just throws them. I was just waiting for, and that's a bad miss. I mean, it was just so in that same vein.
That was wonderful.
While it was completely unnecessary, it was one of the best completely unnecessary things that they've done. And it was just a lot of fun. Because it wasn't overdone. Like, it was there for like a minute or two and then it left. And I was like, great.
That's the type of humor that was needed in the Feast of Stephen.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that really shows you that we have moved from Terry Nation to Dennis Spooner. You've got that kind of humor. In general, the dialogue is a lot snappier and a lot better. He's a better writer, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've long considered Terry Nation to be my favorite hack. So
I think Terry Nation is more of an ideas guy. He's kind of like Lucas. He can come up with ideas, but God, don't ask him to write dialogue.
Needs an editor. Needs someone to filter those through.
He's a better hack than Chris Chibnall, so there's that.
Terry Nation, resurrect him to be showrunner next.
Oh my gosh. Bring back the corpse of Dennis Spooner. So, talking of death, that brings us into episode 9, Golden Death. Very quickly, at the end of Volcano, it seemed like we'd landed in London 1966, and I was getting all excited of, maybe we could get the Daleks in contemporary London. And then the next thing I know, we're in ancient Egypt. Did I miss something? Did we take off from London and land in ancient Egypt? Or
if I remember correctly, there was like a pause where they were showing those, you're right, those contemporary pictures of London. And if it was people were celebrating, I think were they referencing, I guess, the New Year? Like,
yeah, I mean, a week after Christmas, this would have been New Year's Day.
Yeah, so they're just making their reference to New Year's, like, just passing by, like, hey, whoever's watching the show, Happy New Year. I think that was the entire purpose of it. That was my reading of it.
Fair enough. I love the Egypt setting, though.
The set was nice.
Yeah, the sets were really well done.
I also really liked the Doctor putting on that hat. I got some major, like, Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark vibes from him with that hat walking around in Egypt. It was very cool.
He was pimping.
Oh, it was nice.
It was a fetching hat.
But then, what do we have? We have our typical historical kind of like reference, like, who are these strangers? And then who are the present day people want to, fight? And it does feel kind of fillery.
I honestly thought it was something a little unique because this isn't the first time we've had the kind of crossover between sci-fi and historical, because we had that in The Time Meddler. But this is the first time we get a force as brutal and malevolent as the Daleks on historical Earth. You're faced with these kind of cod Shakespearean characters in the Egyptians who, sound like they could be out of the Aztecs or Marco Polo. And suddenly you've got the Daleks showing up and threatening to exterminate everyone and getting into fights with the Egyptians. And then you've also got the monk just being a figure of chaos and showing up in sunglasses, looking like a rock star. Like, I just thought it was such an interesting combination in a way that we haven't seen yet in the show.
I do like the monk as, like you said, a figure of chaos, because he's not necessarily evil. He just sort of has his own agenda, and he will tell any of them anything they want to hear just so he can keep on doing his thing.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
And then we have the monk coming into contact with Chen.
They are so different.
Chen, for the very smallest moment, I had hopes that Chen was trying to undermine the Daleks in a way that was good. But then I just quickly, went away from that idea. Like, the monk has these big, lofty ideas, but it's to, like, better everybody, whereas Chen's big plans are to put him on top, and then the way they go about it is just different. And Chen is like, oh, I'm so smart and blah blah blah. Is just kind of like doing his thing, and I don't know, just like, I like how they had them talking to each other because they're just so different.
Completely agree. I mean, one is very Terry Nation, and I think Dennis Spooner did a great job of keeping Chen talking in Nation's style. And then you get this Dennis Spooner character who's completely different in concept and the way he talks. And that interaction is just so interesting. Loved it.
I also wanted to talk about how the Doctor changes the monk's TARDIS into so many different things.
I love that.
It kind of reminded me in Aladdin when they're like running through the different things that Abu could be, as forms of transportation. And I just really wish that he had stayed with the fancy carriage, because that fancy carriage was great.
It had to become a police box for the purposes of the story.
Suppose.
Honestly, of all of these episodes we've done so far, this might be the one I want back the most, because there are so many little fight scenes in there. There's that element with the monk's TARDIS changing. You've got all those glorious interactions. I would really love this one.
One other thing I wanted to point out, because we didn't get to talk about her a lot. So Sarah, when Sarah and Steven are fighting the Egyptians, and Sarah's just like, karate chop, and it just goes down. And I'm like, yeah, go Sarah, go. And then she's like, yeah, I can teach you a few things, Steven. I was like, yeah, you can.
I'm at a point here where I really like Sarah.
I like certain aspects of Sarah, but as a completely well-rounded character, she's not as well-rounded as Vicky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't have nice things.
No.
She's still not as well-rounded because she's a harsher character, and sometimes it can be a little bit off-putting in certain situations.
And we get what I'd like to call the Pillsbury Doughboy cliffhanger of this episode, where I don't know why, but it was a video. But the appearance of the Time Meddler sticking his hand outside the sarcophagus, it didn't look like a mummy's hand. It looked like the Michelin Man or something. I don't know.
See, I was worried that this was where we would once again devolve into a Hammer horror podcast.
Oh.
I wouldn't say I was worried. I was hopeful.
Yes. So it was nice to get that little bit of moving footage at the end, as we lead into episode 10, Escape Switch, which, in general, is just good to be back with a real episode.
It always is.
Yeah. So it had been such a long time since I'd last seen this. I had forgotten whether I knew it was either going to be the Doctor or the monk in the sarcophagus, but I had forgotten which one it was. And I love that it was the Doctor who had quite clearly overpowered the monk, bundled him up, and shoved him in a sarcophagus. I mean, it seems so obvious now.
Oh, so obvious. Another interesting thing, because, the monk is trying to get them to be like, take them back to the TARDIS. And they're like, well, we don't have keys. And, it's just somewhat surprising me. I'm like, oh, yeah, like these companions don't have keys. I'm used to in like more, modern Who, where they seem to get a key fairly quickly or just be able to walk in.
Yep, nope. This episode, I'm very glad we have this one, because I think this one's really magnificent. We get some of Hartnell's best acting of the story in this one, in my opinion. The scene where he confronts the Daleks and is going to hand over the Terranium.
Oh, and it's shot at that angle where he's like in between pillars and
he is full of righteous anger. It's magnificent.
And he has that hat.
With the hat. I'm glad we get the hat moving. Be a shame if we only had photographs of it.
Yep, and then we got to see the Egyptian fighters trying to overtake the Daleks.
Yeah, and they use the wonderful technique of just surrounding one by rocks. Just surrounding one with rocks.
That worked. I think that was the return of the stupid Dalek.
I want to know what happens, in 5,000 years' time when someone digs it up. The archaeologists come in, it's 1910 or something, and they're excavating this Egyptian site, and they just come across this buried Dalek.
I can help you out with how that works. If they don't know what something is, it's going to be described as being used for religious purposes.
And probably shoved in the British Museum.
Yes.
Big Finish, are you listening?
If you are, I want to know what happened to that guy's greenhouse. Carry on.
Speaking of Daleks, so we've seen a lot of iterations of the Daleks over the 4 stories we've seen them in, right? We've had the desperate survivors, we've had the all-conquering pseudo-Nazis, and then we've had the comedy Daleks in the chase.
The Benny Hill Daleks, as it were.
I think this is where we start seeing the tone of the Daleks kind of moving forward. There's that line about where one of them says, "One Dalek is capable of exterminating them all." And that is just exactly how the new series is set. One Dalek can bring down a planet, almost. And I think this is where the seeds of that are.
I would agree with that. It's still, to me, I think my favorite image of the Daleks is the ones in the first serial where we meet them, because it's just a fantastic display of body horror. That they started out as humanoids, and they wound up being these crazed, insane mutants in these little, life support cases. That's just horrifying.
And that's something we will come back to a couple of times.
Outstanding.
And speaking of Daleks, I have to give my favorite physical bit in this entire episode is Chen with the eye stalk slap.
Oh.
I was like, man, you have to really think you're, king of the universe to be able to slap a Dalek in the eye stalk.
I mean, all through this, Chen is incredibly charismatic. And, I mean, I'm not surprised he, A, became Guardian of the Solar System, because he's clearly a born politician, but B, I mean, the way his self-view just builds and builds and builds. I mean, he's magnificent.
It ramps up, like, the performance and his lines and his, like, egotism just ramps up to an outrageous extent at the very end. It's like carries himself away, practically, the character by the end of the entire serial. I don't want to call it a trope because I don't recall it happening. I don't think of it happening too often, but that is like a concept where the villain, basically gets high on their own supply too much and then like just really believes that they are unstoppable.
Yep. And of course his presence brings us into my favorite Billy fluff of this story, where he goes to say his name and says, Magic, Mavic Chan. Billy Hartnell, you legend. So the Doctor, of course, in this story steals a part of the monk's TARDIS, which leaves the monk unable to steer his own TARDIS. And we're left, our last vision of the monk is, I'll get you for this! Will you, though? Will you?
I really wanted him to come back.
I mean,
speaking of Big Finish.
Yeah, I was going to say, our good friends at Big Finish have actually brought him back.
As they should.
But,
he's a fun character.
He is, and I think the Doctor was a bit of a jerk in this case.
Yeah. Just sitting there like, I can't wait for his next appearance. Oh, wait.
The Doctor doesn't kill anybody, but he does really terrible things that people might end up dying because of it.
True.
More plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With that, we end on a cliffhanger of the TARDIS blowing up, because why not? Which brings us into episode 11, The Abandoned Planet. This is finally where it feels like we are back on track to the main plot of the Daleks wanting to conquer everything. We departed this, what was it, 4-5 episodes ago?
Right so before the Feast of Stephen.
We've had all that fluff, and now we're looping back to it.
I just imagine like some Daleks that are like, I just want a tongue-in-cheek reference for one of them to say like, "Get on with it." Are we supposed to invade something?
I mean, this did devolve into the chase part too at times, so that little bit of humor would not go amiss.
So Chen, continuing to think that he's won. And the Daleks finally have that quick little aside that's like, nah, let's not kill him yet. We still have a use for him. I just loved that because it's like, yep, we all know what's going to happen, and the Daleks just confirmed it. So let's just watch this play out.
I have to admit, I was really looking forward to him dying.
Chad?
Like, okay, you've had one monologue too many. That's enough. And
yet you still have another episode to get through, Don.
Back in Volcano, he sort of called back to a joke I made in our previous episode when he loudly states, "It came from Uranus. I know it did."
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this really starts becoming a story of Mavic Chen's hubris. And then he goes in front of the council and starts talking about how some of them are more equal than others. Just in case all the stuff early in the story about, driving home analogies with this and communism wasn't quite enough, we now get a direct George Orwell reference. Subtlety, not strong here.
No, there's no need.
Yeah. And so Chen's descent into madness, I mean, it's clearly been going on for a little while, but I feel like this episode is where it really starts to come to a head. He kills off another delegate, because why not? One we've barely even heard speak, Giron. Honestly, until the subtitles told us it was Giron, I honestly couldn't have put a name to that delegate.
Oh no, not Giron.
Proclaims himself leader of the council, and then the Daleks trap them in the room. And yet somehow Chen doesn't think that he is being double-crossed by the Daleks.
For a politician, he's really not very good at being able to read the room.
No.
I was so confused, like when he walks up that ramp and sees that like it's barred, and then he just like walks back and he's all like, "Oh yeah, I'm still in." And I was like, "What? Like, did you not just understand that?"
He's clearly trying to, keep his composure and show he's still in control to the other delegates, but
it didn't even show like an aside of him like freaking out.
Yeah.
Which,
Or discussing it with yet another underling.
Or, another monologue. Yeah. It's fine.
So, in the meantime, this is a Dr. Light episode because Billy's off on his holidays again. And we have Stephen and Sarah exploring the Dalek city. And this is really where and Julie, I think you'll probably have an opinion on this, but the utilization of the soundscape from the Daleks for the city on Kemble was awesome. Like that, the city on Kemble, all the sounds as they explore, all those like ethereal noises they used again from that first Dalek serial as they were exploring the city on Skaro. I thought that was so cool.
Honestly, for the majority of this, 12-parter, I can't really comment too much on all of the music choices because there's just so much happening. But it is, probably the most noticeable in this one, especially since no one's there.
Yeah. Where did they go? So
that's actually one thing that was nice about this one is, since I've never seen this before, I was definitely being like, oh my gosh, have they already used the time destructor? Is that why no one is here? And then I kept going through like different things of like what was happening. And so they did a pretty decent job of not really showing all their cards. So I thought this episode was pretty well done in that respect.
Yeah. The one thing that I find so astonishing here is delegates, by the time Stephen and Sarah find them, they are astonished they've been betrayed. How did they not see it coming? And then they start talking about forming their own council to fight the Daleks. And it's like, guys, did you not know what you were signing up for?
Clearly not.
Well, wait. Weren't these the same guy? Mission to the Unknown. Evil Christmas Tree, Melt Face, they were all there. They're all like, let's get on this Dalek invasion. Let's conquer some stuff.
Did they just not know from the beginning, though, that, the Daleks wouldn't have time for them?
But Evil Christmas Tree, or Evil Orko, as I called him, did make a return in this.
Yeah, which,
It did make me pretty happy.
He may not have been in the actual episode, though. We don't know.
Shut up. It's real to me.
He is. Yeah, he's in our hearts. That's for sure.
Sorry, for some reason, that just really tickled me. Forever in our hearts.
There's a point where they're surprised by Chen appearing behind them. And I think he says something about faking his own death. I clearly missed something there because I didn't realize he had supposedly died.
So that would be very funny for a character to do that, to proclaim that he's tricked everyone by faking his death when he hasn't done anything.
That's kind of what I thought happened.
So, Don, what you missed was all the delegates went off to their own galaxies to try and mobilize a force to stop the Daleks. And as Chen's spaceship takes off, it explodes. And they assumed he all died.
I clearly missed
he
that.
died.
I like my interpretation that he thought he faked his death. Everyone else just thought he was in the bathroom. Much better.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. So when I was watching it, I did notice that it had blown up, and I was like, that was anticlimactic. I was like, no, I wanted him to go out in a different way, not just like by blowing up in a spaceship. That's boring. And then I was like, oh, all right, he's back. Cool. He'll die again another way.
Yeah. So speaking of that, let's move into episode 12, Destruction of Time. So, continuing the theme, Chen has, completely lost the plot. He thinks the Doctor's trying to usurp his position with the Daleks. The fact he even thinks he still has a position with the Daleks is something in itself, but...
I had no idea what his plan was. It's like, all right, so the Daleks had them all trapped, and now he's walking in. First, he thinks the Doctor wants to take his place, and he's going in with Sarah and Steven. I'm like, so what are you going to accomplish?
This is where he seemed like a very different character, because in the first half, he had a plan. He was a bit more reserved and planned on betraying the Daleks, and here he was just batshit crazy.
Yeah, he was tweaking out. Just freaking out. Dialed up to 11.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can assume here is he's seen his plan fall apart and he's just in denial and lost the plot. I don't know.
Especially when he was, in that showdown with the Dalek Supreme, which I think is the one that comes with sour cream and tomatoes. And he was...
No, it's called the Dalek Royale.
The Royale with cheese. And he's basically, ordering him to put the Daleks under his command. And the Dalek Supreme is literally just staring him down. And he takes that as meaning that it's happened. And then is shocked when the Dalek that he gives orders to just ignores him.
How much I would have paid so much if loose cannon could have and they could have done this easily by taking old Dalek footage. If once he says that when he asks the Dalek Supreme for that, if the Dalek Supreme, after staring at him for a while, just turns to the camera like The Office and just breaks the fourth wall, are you kidding me? What the hell is going on here?
This is where we do get the Daleks whispering to each other as well, which I love so much.
That was great. And then the Daleks are smart enough to be like, so we can't kill him right here because it's not safe. So go kill him over there where it is safe. All right, good job, Daleks.
Take him outside and have him shot.
Pretty much.
I feel like at this point we've just been waiting for him to die for, I don't know, 2 episodes?
12.
He sort of outlived both his usefulness and his entertainment value.
Yeah. The next time Kevin Stoney is in the show, he is so much better and really steals the show in that story. But yeah, here it's definitely time to move on.
So a wild doctor appears, and he has a plan.
Yeah.
What was he doing last episode?
He disappears without any explanation, suddenly reappears out of nowhere.
With a plan.
With a plan, just oh, by the way, I mean, what? I mean, that is just nuts. So disjointed.
And then he just steals the time destructor. He's like, look what I got.
I'll just turn this baby on right there. Boom. Let's go.
Before we get into the point where the tone starts shifting back to where it started, I gotta say that time destructor would make an excellent lamp, and I really want one.
Yes.
All right, so we're getting to a point where it starts to turn a little dark again.
Yeah.
This is also the point where I really noticed the use of music and sound. I found it super effective.
Yes.
And it's also when I was reminded when I remember that the producer hates women.
And that she didn't want to be a companion and didn't sign on. Of course, she would have had to be under John Wiles, so who could blame her?
Yes.
It wraps up pretty much just, it's a chase to the TARDIS. The Doctor has the effects of the time destructor. It kills Sarah. Stephen comes up just enough, and he must have aged some sort of years if it's all sped up, and then they reverse it. Daleks show up, and then they revert back to their more embryonic
little
form
baby
or whatever.
Daleks.
Little baby Daleks. Jim Henson's baby Daleks.
Again, this is another scene I would really like to be able to see.
Oh, definitely.
I want to see how they did this.
Even in the loose cannon reconstruction, it had the proper emotional impact. As you watch Sarah just get older and older, and then eventually she's just a skeleton,
and then blows away in the dust.
Yep, she gets dusted. Thanos strikes again.
They did it before it was cool.
And what's strange is usually there's so much resolution at the end of a Doctor Who serial. There was so much that happened. They've gone through so much. The death of 2 temporary companions. I feel like they rushed that ending, that discussion between the Doctor and Stephen so quickly that even while it does have some gravitas, it just feels so glossed over.
I would go as far as to say 3 temporary companions, because Brett is starting to fill that role by the time he's killed.
That's true.
Yep, there's that. Another question that I had, the Terranium. The whole point of having this time destructor was, I think, partially to affect the time across the universe, correct?
I thought it was limited to just a planet.
Well, yeah, but so what was the Daleks' end goal? Were they just going to go to one planet? It seems like they went through a lot of effort to get this thing that only affects one planet. I don't see how they can conquer the universe by conquering one planet.
And I think their whole point was to use it on Earth. So then, yeah, I'm not sorry for this. They would gain control of Uranus and then be able to get more of it.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
By conquering Earth?
I'm assuming Earth is basically, the de facto leader head of the solar system, because we humans are pretty self-absorbed and would think that.
Yeah, that's basically, I think, what they said in Mission to the Unknown.
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. So at this point, that's if you're watching the show, that's over 4 months ago. You're watching it in real time.
And I'm not saying I remembered that. I'm just trying to justify it. So.
Okay, great. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that was their end game. Like, they could have conquered the planet in so many other ways without needing that. It doesn't make sense. So this whole thing was a wash.
Let's not think about it too hard. 12 episodes of Dalek Mania. That's what we're going with here. It does feel like it's wrapped up rather quickly. But there is that nice little bit of Stephen being upset about the friends they've lost along the way. I mean, it's a nice character moment, and I think it's reflective of how Peter Purvis has really acted his heart out through this and shown why he's the only one who actually had a contract at the end of it.
And isn't that what really matters?
Exactly.
It's the contracts we made along the way.
Yes.
Well, since we've reached the end of the story, it's time to move on to our metrics. Don, I believe you've been keeping track of the number of deaths over the course of the story. Do you have a final count?
I do, but I lost my notes. So our final count is going to be 11T. Thank you.
11T. Okay. Excellent. All right. Count.
Ken's performance.
How many points does he get? How many camp points do we give?
All of them.
Yeah.
He couldn't have been more camp by the end if he wasn't singing show tunes in between monologues.
I think we capped our camp count at 10, so 10.
10?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, I felt like the Feast of Stephen was deserving. And
on its own, yes.
This is, double the length of almost any story we've had before. So do we want to double the cap on this one?
So 20.
20.
Just give it all. Just give it all.
There was a BBC show in the 70s called Blake 7. The joke about it was that it always oscillated wildly between being absurdly bleak and ridiculously camp. I feel like that's what we have here. All through this story. It can't quite decide which direction to go in.
So it goes in all of them at the same time.
Exactly.
I didn't want to really add on, but I do want to do one quick count. I want to count the number of times they went to a new place.
Yes.
If we go by like the TARDIS or them actually physically going to another place, so like reappearing back somewhere, we have 11.
Jeez.
Almost one an episode.
Oh, yeah.
I would also
Just about
like to point out as a randomly reoccurring feature that I believe in episode 7, Stephen gives Sarah an exact quote, "I'll explain later."
I know we've had one of those before.
We've had at least one.
I'll go back and find out where that was, but we're going to start. I'm adding that to the metrics.
We don't have to go to going to multiple places, but this episode, it just needed that.
I think with any Terry Nation story, that's something we should keep in mind.
Yeah, I think future Terry Nation stories, we should start doing the Terry trope count. With our metrics done, that brings us on to our scoring. And Don, it's your turn to start.
Oh, crap.
For 12 episodes of Dalek Insanity.
This is very difficult for me to gauge as a whole because it's 12 episodes. I've slept since I watched the first half, and frankly, it's difficult to keep it all together. I have an amazing amount of respect for them attempting such an audaciously large serial. 12 episodes plus it's connected to an additional story that was by itself. It has its problems, one being most of it's lost. Pacing, would everyone agree pacing might be a bit of an issue?
Yeah.
But I don't feel I can complain about it too much. Admittedly, Feast of Stephen could be completely cut out and it doesn't matter at all. Other things could also have been trimmed, but considering how high they were going, I think they did a pretty good job. So I am going to give it 7 missing greenhouses out of 10.
All right. Thank you, Don. Julie, you're next.
I, for the most part, agree. This was a very vast undertaking. And for the most part, this whole season, I've been a little bit, I wouldn't say judging too harshly, but this season I haven't enjoyed as some of the others. But I think this serial, it turned itself around. I think once Dennis Spooner kind of picked up the writing for the end of this, the pace picked up, minus the Feast of Stephen, but I think that was Terry Nation anyway. It has its ups and downs. I liked the monk coming back. Chen was a little bit over the top, but ultimately one of the more dynamic characters that we've seen in a while. I'm actually also going to give it 7 out of 10 mummies, I guess.
All right, Reilly.
Last time I talked about this, I talked about how much I enjoyed how the plot jumps around from one location to another. Oh, sweet summer child, how naive I was. It gets kind of ridiculous, all the jumping around, but listening to everyone else give their scores, I've come to realize maybe what they were trying to go for. I mean, and I should have accepted that from the very beginning. It's 12 episodes. They were trying to make an epic. Think about all the location changes. I mean, that's what we think about, like, with Star Wars films. It was like, there's usually 3 big location pieces, and like here they have, as Julie said, 11. We have the volcano planet. We have the planet that the monk ends up on. We have ancient Egypt. We're going all over the place. So yes, and I feel like our scores would have all been a bit higher if we could have actually seen it instead of just having the stills and the reconstruction. I think it probably would have the production value, really would have sold us a lot more, because without it, we're stuck with the audio. And what do we have with that? We have a lot of Chen chewing up scenery, and we have a slow plot that we can't be distracted away from by looking at the awesome sets. I think it's important because of the deaths of the temporary companions for Doctor Who, for any Doctor Who fan. So I think I'm going to give it just a slight notch higher than everyone else. I'm going to go 7.5 confused cricket announcers out of 10.
Good use there of cricket announcers.
Thank you.
Welcome. So from my perspective, I agree. They reached for the sky here. It didn't quite come off. Certainly looking at it from a modern perspective, where I don't know about you guys, but I watched the first half in blocks of 2 episodes and the second half in blocks of 3 episodes. I watched, I guess, the whole story over the space of about 5 days, which is not how this was meant to be watched in any way, shape, or form. This was meant to be watched over the course of 3 months, 1 episode a week, and we did it in 4 weeks-ish, depending on how everyone watched it. Does it have its flaws? Absolutely. Did it have amazing production values? I think so. Every single set we saw, whether it was on the reconstruction or the 3 episodes we had, looked amazing. They put a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort into this. I can't fault Dougie Camfield in the way he realized this on screen. I think that was a challenge, and he rose to it magnificently. I think the entire regular cast did well. It was extremely ballsy in killing off 3 pseudo-companions over the course of the 12 episodes. I think over the remainder of Classic Who, we only have 1 companion who dies after this. So this was groundbreaking. And I think I'm with Reilly, and I can't quite give this just 7. I have to go a little higher. So for me, this is 7.5 M's of terranium out of 10. So that gives us an average score for this of 7.25. Aside from Galaxy 4, every story this season so far has had an average score between 7 and 7.5. So we're surprisingly consistent so far, with the exception of Galaxy 4, which we all thought was awful. You can't win them all. That brings us towards the end of our 2 episodes on this absurdly long story. Before we fully wrap up, we did have some mail. A gentleman by the name of Matthew Cox wrote to us and said, "Hey guys, loving the podcast. It's the perfect companion to my recent marathon. Just a quick thought. Have you thought about the possibility of moving to weekly episodes? 2 weeks is a long time to wait, and I often forget about the next episode by the time it comes around. Either way, keep up the great work." Well, I know Don has some feelings on this, and from my perspective, I would dearly love it if we could go weekly, but, and there's a but here, none of us really have the time right now to churn out episodes on a weekly basis. We all have to watch the episodes, I do research, we record, Don edits, and we all have to balance our professional lives and personal lives outside of the podcast. We might try and do it in the future, but right now we just can't do that, much as we would like to. We'll continue to reevaluate that, but right now we really just have to stay at every 2 weeks. That brings us to the end of things. We'll be back next time when we travel to 16th century Paris with a story that will truly engage your kids as Doctor Who tackles religious persecution. In the meantime, all of our previous episodes are available on your favorite podcasting app. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Watchers4D. And you can still email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, and as you have heard, we will read out your mails. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Don Smith, Reilly Shrek, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, Bring Back the Corpse of Dennis Spooner, was recorded on Wednesday the 20th of November 2019. And always remember, even when the Doctor does show up, everyone can still die sometimes.